to quote their own explanation off their website, provide the nation with a safer, more flexible, and more stable monetary and financial system. Do you believe it has failed that task, especially since the worst financial crises in American history, 1929 and 2008, have happened since the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913?
Well, as you read it directly off their website, to provide a more flexible, so certainly it's been flexible. Look at the way it stretches from one extreme to the other. Certainly more flexible. More stable? Certainly not. And so the problem is that we have a measuring stick, a yardstick that's made of a bungee cord or a rubber band. And so we don't have a good unit of account. And so a better way to do it is, obviously, gold has been money for 5,000 years and was money before the Federal Reserve created their dollar certificates out of thin air. And so if we take a look at using gold as a measurement and compare it to another asset like the Dow Jones, for example, and we can look at the Dow to gold ratio. And so using a non-manipulated unit of account like the dollar, we can see that the boom and bust cycle, or the ratio itself, only has gotten worse and worse and worse. So we've gone from getting to 20 to 1 to 50 to 1, and it just continues to get bigger like a megaphone. Imagine, if you will, if you were carrying like two books in your hand, how easy that'd be to carry 2 books. But as the monetary system gets bigger, if I had 1,000 books in my hand, how unstable that gets. And so it swings wildly from one side to another. You know, the other thing that I would say is that, as Ludwig von Mises would say in the crack-up boom, and then suddenly people realize that inflation is both permanent and intentional. And so if you think about a point that Nico wanted me to make, is that in the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx wrote 10 points to establish a communist society. Point number 5 was the creation of a central bank. And so it was intentionally made this way to be flexible to, yes, they are flexible, certainly not stable.
Absolutely. It's central banking doing what central banking always does. Dr. Jeff Ross, question to you. Let's define what a monetary reset is. Why does it happen? And what do you think Bitcoin's role will be in it?
So that's a great question. Monetary resets don't happen very often. When they do, they're pretty notable. The couple significant ones happened in the 1900s, as people know. So following World War II, there was a great monetary reset. The US dollar was decided to be basically the king asset, the world reserve currency. It was backed by gold. It was on a gold standard based on American dollars. Fast forward to 1971, the US was embroiled in a very unpopular war called the Vietnam War. They couldn't afford it. As most people know, they were rapidly depleting their gold supplies because other nations around the world didn't want dollars because they saw the United States borrowing tremendous amounts of money to pay for this war. They wanted gold. The US, Nixon got to the point where he said, you know what? Hey, tell you what, instead of giving you gold, we're not going to do that. We're just going to take the dollar off of a gold standard. We're going to take it off of a unit of account, off of an honest unit of accounting, and we're just going to call it fiat. Why will it have value? Well, by decree, it will have value. That's what fiat means. So by decree, the government said the US dollar now has value. You can't get any gold for it. The other nations in the world decided to follow along. That was a massive monetary reset. That leads us to where we are today. We're in the final stages of this Keynesian economic experiment. Credit expansion is the rule of the game. Debt is everywhere. Nations have massive amounts of unpayable debt. That's where we are today. When we see that happen, what happens? The economic engine of the world slows down and people start getting desperate. We're seeing cracks in the foundation. We're seeing massive volatility. We're seeing inflation pick up significantly, and in many nations we're seeing hyperinflation. When that happens, things get crazy. Thank God for Bitcoin. Bitcoin came around, as you all know, in 2009. This is the beginning of the next monetary reset. I will just say, and I'll stop here, but monetary resets are generally ugly. They generally come around ugly times. You'll notice that the last 2 that I talked about were both during periods of war, either after war or during a war. We see tremendous geopolitical upheaval during these times, and so that's what is going to birth the next generation, the next great monetary regime, which I believe is Bitcoin, but we can talk about that.
You know, for being called Dr. Ross, that made me Dr. Bear. That made me incredibly bullish, man. Okay, so Louis, to add to what Dr. Ross was saying, right? Clearly, governments benefit tremendously, whether they want to pay for wars or they want to fund war. having this monopoly on the issuance of money, right? They kind of use it as their slush fund. Clearly, they see that party's starting to end. And in response to that, I believe central bank digital currencies were created for this reason. Go ahead.
So yeah, so what government is trying to do after the Great Monetary Reset is they wanted to reset it with their own version of the digital currency that is copying Bitcoin, but is the opposite of the Bitcoin. Is the centralized version of a digital asset, and they want to use that as a a new monetary system to control the monetary policy of the world. So CBDC has been a very favorable subject for government to research on, and I think this is a very difficult and a problematic situation that we are in, because we are facing one way is totalitarian centralized control of our monetary system, and Bitcoin as an alternative, a more free and decentralized monetary system that we can have. But the choice is in our own hand. Do we want government control of our monetary policy, or we want control of our own monetary policy, which is Bitcoin?